World War II. We've all heard about this great war, about the heroes and the struggles countries and religious groups faced. Every year we hear of the horror and the devastation it brought to the world. Well, this is a very different story, one with a completely different perspective that we don't get to see or hear of very often. This is mainly about my grandma, and is her story of what she went through and her understanding of the war as a child. Grandma will be turning 80 this August, making her 3 years old when the war started. She lived with her mother and father. Her father worked in an aircraft factory called Ferry Avalon, so he did not go away to fight in the war. He was in the reserved occupation, so he joined the Home Guard. Fortunately, it did not hit close to home, but for her best friend, her father left her and never came back. This occurred to many children and many wives. War, man, weapons, take lives. The short backstory you need to know is that World War II was a developing war. After the First Great War, as the negotiations of surrender were not suitable for future peace, Germany was the main power with of course Hitler as its leader, and then Italy and Japan also. Then you had the United Kingdom, France, and the USSR. After a bit of tension for many years, the spark of the war was the assassination of the Archduke, and World War II began. 1941, my grandmother was off to school. She took a gas mask with her and had to practice putting it on daily, also going to large air raid shelters in the school grounds. As she was so young, the routine of practicing how to put on a gas mask and how to quickly and efficiently find and get in an air raid shelter was not out of the norm. It was part of the daily routine. Chemical weapons had been frequently used during World War One, and many soldiers had died or been injured in gas attacks. Mustard gas was the most deadly of all poisonous chemicals used. There was a real fear that it would be used against civilians in Britain. Heavy and frequent bombing attacks of British cities were known as the Blitz. At 4:56 p.m. on 7th September 1940, the air raid sirens wailed at German Air Force. The Luftwaffe launched a massive airstrike on London. Over 350 bombers flew across the Channel from airfields in France and dropped 300 tons of bombs on docks and streets at the East End of London. The shelters were half buried in the ground with earth heaped on top to protect them from bomb blasts. They were made from 6 corrugated iron sheets bolted together at the top. The entrance was protected by a steel shield and an earthen blast wall. The 21st of September 1940, the London Underground started to be used as an air raid shelter. On the busiest night in 1940, 177,000 people slept on the platforms. Families, schools, and hospitals were all told to board up windows and doors. No lights were to be visible from the air. The blackout was to prevent any enemy aircraft from knowing that there was a town beneath them. The blackout had a huge effect on people's lives, as thousands died in road accidents due to lack of street lighting and dim traffic lights. To help prevent accidents, white ships were painted on roads and lampposts. People were encouraged to walk facing the traffic, and men were advised to leave their shirt tails hanging out so they could be seen by cars with dimmed headlights. The current Queen, as a young teen, spoke to the children of Britain on a national radio just as the evacuation started. This was how the news came to London and many other towns that it was time to have all the children leave the cities. They didn't go willingly. They got issued a letter, and the children were forced to leave. Nearly 2 million children were evacuated from their homes during World War II. They were evacuated to the countryside to escape the bombing. Children had labels put onto them as though they were parcels. They stood at railroad stations not knowing where they were going or if they would be separated from brothers and sisters. They were very scared about being away from their families and never knew if they would see their parents again or return home to the same house that they had once left. They had to adjust to new schools and make new friends. Clemente R. Attlee was a British politician who became Prime Minister in 1945, who was leader of the Labour Party between 1935 through 1955. He claimed the removal of British children population was a matter of utmost urgency. that without a future generation safe, there would be no future for Britain. The placement of children was not always the family's decision, but at times that made it easier, as the responsibility for the care of the evacuated children had been delegated to the various state governments by the Commonwealth Government. In conjunction with the state child welfare departments, citizens' committees were set up to undertake the general work of organizations and receptions. The people in charge controlled where people went, and when it was government issuing orders, then more things were thought to occur for the good, as they knew more details of the war and tactical strategies of the enemy forces. The process of moving children was dependent on many things, mostly transportation, and this was dangerous as this was a target zone in the war and was vital for transporting war supplies, troops, and resources. This was also used as propaganda to make sure women wouldn't try and keep children in the cities or take them back too soon, as it was still so dangerous in many cities. Cities were mostly under attack as they had greater possibility of large numbers of casualties, but they were also main areas for war supply. In some cases, not all children were sent to the country out of Britain, as there wasn't always enough guarantee for the safety of all the children. This made the British government ask for the help from neutral possible Allied powers, as they need to keep British children safe was a bigger priority of theirs. Therefore, government openly pleaded with the United States to send ships to carry out of the islands some hundreds of thousands of women and children. The British currently accept social migration as a possibility is proven by the fact that the parents of some 502,000 children had already asked that they would be shipped either to Canada or the United States, resulting in many children moving to the Allied powers' native lands. With many movement of children and not wanting many to know the routes used to conserve information spreading, the children themselves were told not to tell the apparent truth when asked. This is made clear in the book by Haber when talking about the risk of transporting children. In an apparent attempt to conceal the routes and methods used, they frequently tell children to lie about how they arrived. Many allies were there to help, and many worried parents made sure the future generations were safe, and women were there to help. The US, Australia, and Canada were all natural allies in World War II, and so they all considered safe places. As many children were not ready to make a living by themselves, they had to receive aid from many locations. This included other family relatives to friends to just the community as a whole. There was no guidelines of what they should be doing, but when a siren rang or teachers told you to put on the gas mask and get in shelters and stay quiet, you just did that without questioning or arguing. You went to school, you had fun, you helped in the garden, you helped on the farms, but never really was there a big task for you in the countryside. My grandma surprisingly then proclaimed that these memories are so vivid and for her generation the norm, that for her surely everyone has similar memories. Music in the 1930s was big bands, and swing music was very popular. One of the most popular singers at the time was Vera Lynn, who sang songs like We'll Meet Again and Nellie Bluebirds over the White Cliff of Dover. When war broke out, most sporting events were stopped, so children mostly played war games and cards. Before 1945 would import about 55 million tons of food, but with the war and the rationing of food, that dropped to 12 million. Every person was issued with a ration book, and different ones were given to different people. Different clothes were handed out to different selection of people. One was a blue for the children mostly, one was for the green for the pregnant women and young children, and buff colored for the regular civilian. Ration stamps became a kind of currency, with each family being issued a war ration book. Each stamp authorized a purchase of rationed goods in the quantity and time designated, and the books guaranteed each family its fair share of goods made scarce thanks to the war. This occurred because the government wanted everybody to have a fair share, and that was suitable for their health. It was introduced in the beginning of the 1940s. There was a fear of some people hoarding food, and some of the poorer people not being able to afford food when prices rose, so it was introduced. So scarce objects were still available to all in the war. For example, sugar. This was a way that everyone went through the same thing. No one really could hide from the devastation, and the people had to be able to keep moving forward. Food rationing was not stopped until 9 years after the war, in July of 1954. When returning home, she was 8 years old, and many things had changed, and many buildings were no longer there. The school that she went to when she was 3 was blown to pieces, and the bomb crater was in the playgrounds. No one was hurt as many had evacuated that area. The news came of the war ending in Europe. It was a street party just like many other locations in Great Britain, but it was a celebration to remember World War II and the children that had to evacuate. Thank you to my grandma in England for giving me this information, and thank you for listening.